Hello and welcome to Afflictions Sugarcoated, a podcast where we sugarcoat some of the world's so-called afflictions and rate their plausibility on a scale of 1 to 5. I'm Minnie Kim, and today we will be sugarcoating Imposter Syndrome. Now, as an avid debater, there are some pet peeves that I have. Number one, when people confuse arguing with debate, there's so much more nuance to debate than a lot of people think. And I think that schools are getting around to teach this more than they originally would. Second of all, is when people accuse me of debating all the time simply because they know that I debate. And this closely ties into the first one, given that whenever I try to negate something or try to clarify myself, I'm like portrayed as this really bellicose person. And in a more logical way, that I'm trying to express myself and articulate myself in a more logical way, it somehow comes by as if I'm trying to debate that person when I'm really just trying to act like a normal human being, saying no, that's not really the best idea in this situation. To this day, I'm not sure if I'm actually just debating all the time or if my debate tone is just annoying to people. I think it's probably both. I try to be more aware of it, but I am seriously just unclear as to why people think that I pick arguments with everyone, although I am fairly careful in where I devote my time to. As the saying goes, pick your battles, and I try. Apparently, it's not going as well as I thought. My friend said some time ago that debating was bad for human relationships. It's true. We try to separate our personal relationships from debate motions, petty ones, serious ones, other just really, really bad arguments, and sometimes really good arguments. We end up chatting about how our respective arguments make more sense than the other, or attacking how our respective arguments really don't make sense. Another phenomenon of mine is that people think that I'm overly confident. At a young age, I learned that confidence was the key in making people buy my BS at times and to sometimes consolidate my very valid points. This was easily materialized in front of me, doing MUN, taking control of the room, even though I didn't have necessarily the greatest points. It was all about leadership. And that oftentimes required a lot of confidence and just pretending that I was the king of the world. Now, I try to be humble. I try to view myself as equal or sometimes inferior to others to remind myself that I'm nothing in comparison to all of those really, really good kids. And sometimes I let myself feel a little more. Those are the times when I'm mainly validated by a personal achievement and not whatnot. We've all had that feeling once we like get 100 on a really hard test or a really hard assignment, when we win an award in a competition, all those stuff. Maybe my personality is indeed pretentious, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if people said that about me. And even more frankly, I'm not one to care. But I've come to an age where I have no other choices but to care. My image in my community, my peers, seniors, etc., that's important. And these shorts or videos about how we should live our own lives and just not care about what others think are just really stupid because you should not be a complete a hole, if you know what I mean. But perception will always prevail, and I've tried to live by that. It just doesn't work that way in real life. In comparison to what other people tell us in elementary school, for example, when we learn books like Wonder and we read those books, like, we shouldn't care about other people. I think that we should. It's pretty useful at times. And now that I've entered a more professional working environment with people stressing to go to college and thus inconceivably more qualified than me, I've tried to remain neutral and quote unquote calm. If you've noticed, I've mainly made the first part of this podcast about pride and things around that area, but the real star of the show is when I'm surrounded by people who are indeed better than me, and I don't feel like I fit in, which is a pretty new feeling to me because an academically stimulating environment just wasn't available to me given my age and background and everything. Now that I've failed enough, I see my holes and I see that I need to improve them. That's where imposter syndrome comes in. According to our best friend Wikipedia, imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon or impostorism, is a psychological occurrence in which people doubt their skills, talents, or accomplishments and have a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as frauds. I think that that's a pretty good definition, and it's coming from a somewhat prideful person, so yeah. Now people just assume that I think that I'm the king of the world, and that is one of my least favorite perceptions, but like, what can I do? I won't specify the details, but I am now in a more stimulating environment, and I know for a fact that my skills will be incomparable to that of others. I've won certain things that some people don't think that I deserve, given my normal skill that they know of me, so their perception of me always will prevail in terms of whether I deserve something or whether I don't. That to me is pretty scary because like frankly, they're obviously better than me. So I don't know how I got up to that point. And it's probably luck. And I think that they acknowledge that it's probably luck, but there's always that residual feeling that people can't get rid of. I simply don't know how to strike the balance between being too humble and being too confident in a really standoffish way. Because I know for a fact that I've had a lot of people around me who are way, way too humble. And it's kind of annoying because they're really good and they know it. And like I don't hate them for being too humble, but it's just sometimes it feels like they're showing off second-handedly, although they don't really mean to. And being too confident, obviously, that's annoying, and that's coming from a pretty confident person myself, or at least I try to be that way. In my experience, the latter, which is being overly confident, is a way worse situation to be conceived in because, once again, I don't want to seem like an a hole. The solution I found was imposter syndrome, and it has been working so far, except for the environments that I'm not stimulated in, and those environments I really struggle in because I don't know what to do to strike that balance again. Do I need to be humble even though these people are really just not up to my standard? Or do I stay confident and assert my position? Like, if this is not a jungle series, but I think we all know what we mean. There can never be an affliction sugarcoated without a quote. So, there's a quote I like by Dr. Jessamy Hibbard, I probably pronounced that wrong, that says, "We can't all be imposters, can we?" I think that this somewhat puts things into perspective. I'm pretty sure that in my case, the superior people don't have imposter syndrome, but we never know. In my opinion, they're too good to have anything remotely close to that. At the end of the day, it is just character. Character. It defines me. It's funny. I used to think that our intelligence defines us, and I still do. I still do that if you're smarter and if you perform better, then, like, just on a net scale, you contribute better to society. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, and I'm very happy for those exceptions, but it's just a general rule that if we do better, we contribute more. I would follow this rule. I would pretty much abide by this rule at all costs and make sure that I would be in that top half of whatever, that top percentile, that top place, that top award, all of those things. I chase that so hard, and I even chase that now because it's validation, it's part of everything. At this point, I'm not sure why though. I think that our character defines us. Maybe it's because the last few weeks have been somewhat of an emotional turmoil based on my competency and my confidence, but also my character. It's a looming hill that I just can't seem to touch. I hope that someday I will, and I'll be someone that is likable most of the time, and I don't seem like the person to shout at your face simply because I like to fight, which I don't know anyone who likes to do that, so not really sure why there are assumptions like that. Maybe we expect the worst of people, and maybe I won't be the most approachable person. I personally know that if I had the chance to go to another me, or more helpful and more open person rather than a very reserved person like myself, I would go to that open person. Either way, I hope that I'm not callous or callow. I hope that I don't portray myself that way. I hope that my image isn't that way in my community, although some may say that it is already that way. I hope that I strike the balance between humility and pride. Until then, I may have to live separate lives. One in imposter syndrome, and the other in my supposedly debating world, because I like fighting every single person and nitpicking the logical jumps that they make. That is probably the two sides that I'm going to have to live in. Not sure how I'm going to deal with it, but the main focus should be, and it lies on imposter syndrome. There will be hard days, but that's fine with me. Moving back to the quote that kind of got lost in the emotions and all the rambling, we can't all be imposters, can we? I am sometimes an imposter, I'm sometimes not, I'm sometimes very far from being an imposter, and I'm sometimes am an imposter. I don't know how I sometimes got into a higher position than people that I know are better than me. I know that they think that they're better than me. It just seems to perplex them. And I know it's not something that's directly a hit at me, it's just saying that there's injustice in the system. I'm making quite sure not to clarify all of this and make it into a vivid picture and vision of what I'm talking about because of specific reasons that I won't mention. But we all feel imposter syndrome first. I read studies that say imposter syndrome can actually help us perform better. I'm trying to discount that. I'm trying to make that my average life, but I'm also trying to strike that balance. I definitely don't want to be too humble, but I think that escaping this trance of everyone thinking that I'm a very belligerent person is the main focus of my early years, for the lack of a better term. I don't want to be an a hole. Nobody wants. Maybe one day it'll clear up to them that I never meant any bad. I'm not that reserved, or I'm also not really that introverted, to be quite honest. I'm also not too horrible of a person. I hope that someday that they realize that and I can fix my flaws if they are to give that to me. Until then, imposter syndrome works fine. I'll give the sugarcoating of imposter syndrome a 3. This podcast was written and produced by me, Minnie Kim. If you have any comments or reviews, please feel free to write any and all thoughts on your podcast reviews. If you would like to suggest an affliction for me to sugarcoat, please email me via afflictionssugarcoated@gmail.com. To end the podcast on a positive note, I want you to think to yourself, what exactly is your character? Are you that nice person that everyone can come to if they have a problem, relationships and whatnot? Or are you like me, in which people really think you are? I think we all know what that means. Okay. And try to fix that, by the way. Because what's the point of acknowledging something if you can't fix it? Have a good one, everybody.